Hello, everybody. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live session today. Very warm welcome to you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are dialing in from. And which begs the rather interesting question, where are you dialing from? We are super excited to have a global audience today. Um, Come on, let us know where everybody is. Type in the chat, comment your destination, and we'd really love to hear from you. So, today we have a very exciting topic. We are going to talk about generative AI and its impact on customer experience. All of us know that generative AI has been quite the rage over the last few weeks and months. Today, we are going to talk about what it really means from an use case standpoint. What do enterprises need to be responsible about adopting generative AI with a focus on customer experience? With me today, we have a very exciting set of people. I'm Chirajit. I go by CJ. I'm a partner with the Everest Group. I'll be moderating your session, and with me I have Nisha. Nisha is a practice director with Everest Group, and she brings a wealth of experience in the interactive experience space. And finally, we have a very exciting guest with us today. We have George Ayanu. George, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, CJ. Hello, everyone. Good to be here. I'm very excited. This is my first LinkedIn Live, so we'll see how it goes. But I just want to thank Everest for having me. CJ, Nisha, thank you for this opportunity. Sorry,
Excellent.
I'm George. I didn't introduce myself. I'm George. I have 27 years of experience in digital, mainly e-commerce and setting up sort of modernized digital cultures. Previously, a managing partner of a digital experience company, and now turned to advisory and investment. So thank you for having me.
George, welcome aboard. We are delighted to have you here. Excellent. So, before I kick us off, I just have one request for everybody who's dialing in. This is really about you. This is really about trying to engage with a wider audience. Please keep your questions and comments coming in through the chat window. We will try to take as many of them as we can live as part of this session. If we can't, we will try our best to get back to you from Everest Group. With that said, let's talk a little bit about generative AI. And, sometimes I think we live in this world of technology and where every technology is supposed to be a big game changer. And the question really is this real? Is the hype worth it? Or is this just a passing fad? So let's look at some of the statistics. So just in the first quarter of the calendar year, we have had almost $2 billion of venture funding on generative AI. Generative AI, as epitomized in some ways by ChatGPT, that's kind of taken the world by storm. In 5 days, it reached 1 million users, and that's, to me, that sounds like one of the key indicators, because one of the reasons why technology really takes off or adoption really takes off is because it's easy, it's simple. And that statistic really hammers home the point around how easy it is to adopt, right? More than 10,000 organizations have signed up for Microsoft Copilot, right, within a quarter, right? And side by side, it's real, and it's also got the attention of regulators. So more than 11 countries are already trying to understand the legal implications, trying to work through the legal frameworks, which makes generative AI relatively easy and safe to use in a lot of ways, right? Um, we at the one could argue at the mid in the midst of all of this is one company called Nvidia, and Nvidia's stocks have grown phenomenally, and their market capitalization has touched $1 trillion, which is like really elite exclusive club. Fundamental beyond Nvidia, which are the companies which are actually making it real? Which are the companies which are actually making generative AI real for businesses. And that is a lot of system integrator companies. So your classic system integrator model, if I look at some of the large ones, almost each and every one of them have announced generative AI related investments over the past quarter. I mean, that 9 out of 13 is probably a little bit outdated since we wrote it a few days back. And of course, we know about Microsoft's investment. So I'm just rounding up a set of facts, but really, what's happening under the hood? What are people really talking about? What is the pattern of investment? Are people what are the use cases in which people are training generative AI? Nisha, what do you think? You are closer to this. You talk to a lot of customers. You also see a broader swathe of the market in some of this. What you see?
Yeah, I think CJ, for me, generative AI is very compelling on a personal level as well, in addition to a professional. And the reason for that is that when you talk about generative AI, and especially ChatGPT, everybody can use it. Unlike quantum computing or cloud computing, which are important technologies in their own right, you cannot essentially see these technologies, but ChatGPT is something that you can see, and users do not necessarily need a degree in machine learning to derive value for it. So, on a personal level, I think my niece has stopped coming to me because she does not need any help with respect to essay writing. On a professional front, I have started using ChatGPT especially often, specifically when it comes to using it as a starting point. If I'm trying to familiarize myself with a new area of research, I know a lot of people belonging to the creative and the design space who have started using it extensively, specifically when it comes to overcoming the creative roadblock and really augmenting the nature of the output that they are producing. In fact, there are some statistics from a recent industry interaction that we have had where a large number of executives participated in this interaction. And what you see over here is that these statistics are quite compelling, wherein a majority of the executives are saying that not only have they started using generative AI and as well as ChatGPT for some of the business use cases, but an overwhelming percentage of them have started to derive value from it. And given these statistics, given the ease of access, given the fact that anybody who has internet access can possibly use it to derive value from it, brings me to the point that when we talk about AI and when we talk about democratization of AI, generative AI is really making true democratization of AI possible. And that is not just happening across a number of use cases that I highlighted, but that is happening across the experience services ecosystem. In fact, George, I think you and I were having a conversation as well where we were talking about generation of text, generation of audio, and generation of video, and how all of those use cases are kind of helping a lot when it comes to the customer experience ecosystem. So, George, do you want to quickly talk about what's happening in the experience area when it comes to generative AI?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nisha. Thanks, CJ. Um, Before we get on to that bit, I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying about the true democratization of AI in terms of Chat GPT, DALI, and things like that. You know that when I've got my 11-year-old son playing with DALI and coming up with all these different images and going down this rabbit hole, and then at the same time, my 81-year-old father-in-law also talking about things. So you've got both ends of that spectrum and that easy access. So I think that is truly what's really exciting about this. In the hands of people, it can have really good value. And just on a personal note, when you're talking about the roadblocks, I've found it really useful. At times when you just don't want to start things, or you're waiting for that right moment, or you just don't know how to do something. In the past, Chat GPT has really helped me. So, for example, I've always played around with the idea of writing a book. Have no idea where to start. Don't even know how to structure anything. So I gave that a go in Chat GPT. With the topic, help me structure what a book would look like of 130 pages, X amount of chapters, and it gave me a framework which manages now to chunk it out into bite-sized pieces. So I think for some of those things, it allows you to just get either a big topic and break it down, or just how to help people. So it's not necessarily doing your work for you, but it's just guiding you and helping you. Whereas ghostwriters would have done that in the past and probably cost $25,000 or whatever. So I think there's a real sort of democratization. For me, I think there's an interesting point where you're talking about it professionally, and I'm wondering whether there's going to be this culture of almost using it's going to be a dirty word or a dirty kind of, you might not want to admit to using it sometimes. And I think there's no reason why you shouldn't. Obviously, if you just get it to write everything and then just use it, there's some downsides. I think you can realize when things like that happen. But for me, I've been quite open with my teams and who I've been using, saying like, it's a great tool. It just gets you to a foundation. And I think that's where we'll start seeing maybe, I had a discussion with someone on LinkedIn off a post of mine, and they seem to think that large marketing teams or large creative teams would get reduced, because I think sometimes it's around, can it help us do some of the things that people don't like doing in their jobs? Maybe the commoditization piece, the initial pieces, and then it allows people to focus on true value. So I think that's where we're going to start seeing a true sense of, help me shift left on some of the stuff where chatbots used to do it, and where you can automate certain pieces of a journey or a process in terms of UI and user experience. I think that's where we'll see generative AI come to sort of fruition, where it's some of the templating type stuff, or some of the things that real creatives, real experienced professionals don't love working in that particular moment or that space. I think that's where you'll start seeing these tools coming to bear to then start helping people out, to then say, right, I've now shifted 2 or 3 hours of my day away. I've got 3 hours now to add value to my customer or to my product or to my business. And I think that's where it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And some of that actually, Nisha, if you look at the chart you're showing, right, that's exactly, by the way, what our survey shows us, right? So most people think that it's an enabler, right? And it doesn't necessarily need to be a dirty word in some ways, right? But what it really does is it accelerates us on the first piece, right? Nisha, back to you.
Yeah, sure. And another thing, I think before I, start talking about some of the industry-specific applications, George, you mentioned one. There is a bit of a hesitance with respect to, admitting whether you are using this or not. But the other bit of, fear in the industry is about, jobs going away, or a lot of concerns around releasing this technology without proper risk management. While we'll talk about that in the latter half of our conversation, but I think the point that I want to drive across at this point is that whenever we talk about any breakthrough technology in the industry, now whether that breakthrough technology is personal computer or whether that big breakthrough technology is an iPhone, um, generative AI and one generative AI platform can give rise to many applications, just like iPhone gave rise to many applications. And those applications can be used for audiences of any age, of any education level, and in fact, any location which has access to internet. And that kind of gives, sends across a very powerful message with respect to the kind of applications and the use cases that you can use generative AI for, which kind of also brings me to this slide, because when we talk about generative AI, we essentially refer to its ability to generate content. Now, whether that content is text, audio, video, image, code, or a plethora of examples that you see on this slide. But what is really interesting today is that if you look at all of these use cases are finding applications in the customer experience ecosystem, and a lot of enterprises that we continue to interact with on a daily basis have either started asking questions about use cases, or are already operationalizing some of these use cases. Just to give you a few examples, right? When we talk about text generation, that's a classic use case when it comes to customer service interactions. In fact, Tesco is one organization that has started using the ability of generative AI to generate text to augment their customer service operations by giving pre-generated scripts to people who work in the contact center operations. If you talk about the audio generating capability of generative AI, Masters Tournament, in fact, has started using generative AI from the perspective of AI commentary solution when it comes to detailed golf narration. If you talk about video as well, now that's a very interesting example in the case of experience because that finds a lot of application in the advertising and design industry. I continue to interact with a lot of design agencies which are using generative AI along with some of the other applications in order to generate end-to-end advertisements and videos just using generative AI and also personalizing those advertisements. Image generation is a classic example. When George was speaking, he was talking about user interface design, but image generation also from the perspective of Levi's, which has started using generative AI to really generate hyper realistic model avatars for their e commerce platform. And those avatars are promoting the cause of diversity when it comes to diversity in body type, when it comes to diversity in age, or whether even it comes to diversity in skin color. Code generation is an interesting example, right? CJ was speaking about it earlier as well. But when it comes to code generation, what developers have started to do now is to use generative AI for code completion or for code refactoring. And that what that does beautifully is that it frees up developers' time and they can focus more on adding new functionalities to applications and better understanding customer requirements versus spending a lot of time on code review and code completion. Chatbot is a classical example. There are so many digital banks that we continue to interact with, which are asking us questions on how do I use a generative AI chatbot for customer interactions and for free flowing customer queries. And that's one of the important use cases in the experience ecosystem that we are seeing a lot of interest in. Data and search is classic because a lot of organizations have a lot of knowledge that is residing within the organization, but no proper way of retrieving that knowledge when needed. And generative AI has started helping a lot of those organizations retrieve that knowledge. In fact, CJ and I the other day were on a call with a bank which was trying to build an application for their own employees so that these employees slash advisors could access the repository of data that the bank has access to inform the investment decision for a lot of their customers. So if you see from the perspective of generation of content, audio, video, all of these use cases are finding a lot of applications when it comes to the customer experience ecosystem. I don't know, George, if you'd like to add to some of those examples based on some of the interactions you're having, or CJ, anything that you would want to add.
Sure. Thanks for that. I think you're absolutely right that a lot of people are testing and trialing things, and like you're saying with the iPhone, having sort of born so many other apps out of it. I've been approached a lot through sort of a lot of startups wanting to build out certain AI models and certain applications for specific needs. So absolutely seeing that. I think where it's interesting is the speed at which the industry is moving allows the businesses to move at a certain speed as well, right? So people are keen to get things out live, to trial things, and to keep evolving their product or their offering. It's going to be very interesting in terms of the CIO, CTO landscape, because as people are kind of impatient with trying some of these things, rightfully so, right? COVID's created that sort of that mentality of agility, get something out there, trial it. If you fail, retry something. There's going to be a lot of shadow IT and shadow marketing, shadow AI, shadow ML appearing. And so the amount of spend on those areas has to also have spend on cybersecurity in those other areas. I think there was a question about AI and ML for developers and things like that. Maybe we can go to that one, pass it over to CJ. But yeah, I see a
Yeah,
lot
no,
of.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think great points. Nisha, I think you brought up some brilliant use cases around how generative AI can be used for good, right? And also used for productivity and superior content in a lot of situations. George, you spoke about what this eventually means from an enterprise governance standpoint, right? So we will definitely get to a stage eventually where we need to think about how do we bring it all together. Let's take a pause and take some questions. We have some very interesting questions from our audience. So Ajit is asking, what about software developers? Should software developers learn AI and ML? So my response to that is yes, depends on what kind of software you are developing. So one of the things that we need to get to eventually is if AI starts spitting out software, somebody needs to be able to, tear it apart, to be able to explain it, to be able to test it, to be able to assure that code. I don't know of a single company in the world that's going to put pure AI developed software in production mode without a human assuring and signing off on that code, right? So that's one way of thinking about it. But I think the real value that's going to happen is it's really about context. It's really about, so if you are a software engineer and you are wondering about where differentiation lies in the future. I think right now we are still safe because I've seen the code that's developed by generative AI in today's world. It requires there's a long way to go before it can pass the test of being ready. And so one of the challenges, for example, that we are seeing with AI developed code is that there is a tremendous proliferation of orphan code, right? And the amount of time quality assurance guys, testers need to spend in kind of cleaning all of that out is quite significant. But in the future, I think differentiation really lies around two themes. One is how contextual can you get, right? Do you really understand the code in the context of a customer's business, in the context of an industry, in the context of a business process, in the context of a regulatory environment in a particular industry? The second thing is really about problem solving, right? I think that's never going to go out of fashion, right? So we speak about software development versus software engineering, and I think the difference really is in terms of architectural problem solving. So I think that's where the future is headed. Um, let's take a couple of more questions, right? So Shashi Bhushan asks, please share some concerns and risks too with this technology and respective mitigation. So we're going to get into that, Shashi. Just stay with us. We are going to talk about that. Let me check Prathamesh's questions before we talk about it, right? So, what about licensing rights for visual content? If they draw from explicitly stated paid licenses and create final images, visual content, is it an infringement of copyright? And a similar question is being asked by Padma Kant. Does it increase plagiarism issues if the same style of content is being developed? Nisha, do you want to talk about that? I think we have
Yeah.
some interesting examples about the visual content plagiarism piece.
Yes, yes. Thanks for that, CJ. I think the question around the licensing rights for visual content, I think Adobe to a great degree is trying to solve for it. So, initially, when there was a lot of talk on generative AI when it came to content generation, there was also a lot of concern about whether the content that is being generated through models which are trained on data that may not be GDPR compliant, or what are the copyright issues associated with, let's say if I am generating a content using any generative AI model, is it my content or does it belong to everybody else, etc. What we are increasingly seeing in the industry now is, specifically with respect to Adobe and their Firefly solution, is that they are trying to offer generative AI solutions which are trained on data for which they have explicit content and the data resides within the organization, and B, the content that you are generating through those particular LLM models the creator community is also being empowered. And what I mean by that is, if you are generating a particular content, you could possibly have a tag to it that not to be used for training, or this is a content that is created by XYZ person and hence it is not available for distribution or for training of other AI models as well. So A, yes, that has been an issue, but B, I truly believe that there is a lot of progress that is happening in the industry with respect to data labeling, training of the data, and with respect to empowering the creator community when it comes to usage of the content that is being generated through these models.
Excellent. Let's get into a couple of areas. I think the audience is also very interested in learning about two things. One is what what are the use cases that we are seeing in customer experience, right? And second is what are the risks that we see, and how should enterprises think about mitigating some of that, right? And Nisha and George, do you want to start addressing that?
Yeah, I'll probably start by talking about the use cases in customer experience. And one of the things that we are seeing, while the area of customer experience is quite vast, but these are some of the four areas where we see enterprises investing a lot, and either investing a lot or asking a lot of questions with respect to how to operationalize some of this, and B, the provider community as a result taking a lot of market messages and developing solutions around this. I think when it comes to the experience ecosystem, one of the classic areas where we are seeing a lot of investment is data for marketing, because within the customer experience space, you need to understand the customers very well, where the entire concept of customer 360, audience understanding and building comes into picture. And what generative AI is helping marketers do is to analyze the customer data in a much deeper fashion in order to get a lot of insights out of it, and also as a result drive the personalization agenda, or what I like to call real-time personalization at scale agenda. The other interesting area where we are seeing a lot of investment is with respect to digital commerce. Now, we all know that a lot of enterprises are jumping onto the digital commerce bandwagon, not only just in the retail and CPG industry, but in financial services, in healthcare, in life sciences, etc. And within digital commerce, what is also happening is that there are interesting applications with respect to generative AI helping in a dynamic product description, in catalog generation, in helping with even image generations, like I talked about the Levi's example earlier, and even dynamic landing pages depending on who is the customer who's coming to your website, and based on that, what is the text and what is the visuals that you would want to show around that. The other area is campaign and media, where to some extent the advertising comes into picture, where depending on whom you are speaking to and which channel you are speaking to that person through, generative AI is helping you send targeted messages from the perspective of text, image, and video, as well as audio, when it comes to targeting the customers depending on where the customer is coming from. It is helping a lot with respect to SEO and SEM optimized content as well, and at the same time automating a lot of workflows when it comes to the entire campaign generation, as well as delivering those campaigns across channels. Design services is interesting because we keep talking about the skill gap that exists when it comes to user interface and user experience industry. We keep talking about there isn't enough talent, or if talent is available, the cost of talent acquisition, etc., is very high. And even if you have the right talent, you have something called the creator's block, wherein it becomes increasingly difficult sometimes to generate original ideas. And no, with that context, what generative AI is doing is it is helping with a lot of aspects with respect to user interface generation and defining user workflows. Not only that, it is also helping a lot with respect to user research. In fact, the other day, George and I were talking to one of the design agencies, which has been working in the industry for about 20 years now, which means that they have access to a plethora of customer data. They do a lot of customer research. And what one of the use cases they were trying to operationalize was how do I use this 20 years of customer data that I have gathered, which by the way is GDPR compliant because I have consent for that data, to build a generative AI model so that tomorrow, when I am delivering projects for my customers, for my clients, when it comes to customer experience, I don't have to keep doing net new research, but a lot of predictions with respect to customer behavior is something that can be made by this model that I am developing. So there are a plethora of applications when it comes to the customer experience ecosystem, with these four being the topmost one in which we continue to have conversations in the market. But what is also interesting to remember is that generative AI has the capacity to impact 45 to 55% of the hours that any company is spending when it comes to their experience operations or their customer experience implementations, because the productivity and the efficiency advantages that it can offer is to a large extent unprecedented when it comes to some of the other technologies that might have had an impact on customer experience. So that's from the perspective of use cases. George, would you like to share some of the other examples or any perspectives?
Sure, thank you. I know we've got a lot of questions, so I'll probably just leave with one really good example that I think, especially in uh, the sort of generation of content and catalogs, like you were saying in e-commerce. Many moons ago, I was helping another company work out how to do descriptions on their products, and we found there was a lot of work involved in setting two types of personas. So, for example, memory cards. Okay, when you're selling the memory sticks, USB sticks in the good old days, they had a default of 5 GB, 2 GB, whatever. Now that only appealed to a certain people, to a certain amount of users that were technically savvy, and so we did a case for A/B testing. What if you put 3,000 photos, 50 videos, which would be far easier for that consumer to understand how, what's the difference between a 3 gig or a 5 gig? Okay, well, I can put an extra 5,000 photos on this one. So AI would accelerate that today, right? You're able to then write multiple descriptions from multiple viewpoints and test that out, rather than having a manual copywritten piece. And when you work that it does increase conversion rate, it does help, then you could go over it and really put more effort, manual copywriting, UX copywriters expertise and things in there. But it gives a very good benchmark into trialing something through A/B or multivariate testing. So I think generative AI in that perspective will really help. CJ, I don't know if we want to take some questions.
Yep, absolutely. I was just fascinated listening to you with both you and Nisha in terms of some of the use cases. I think the way it impacts customer experience across the value chain in so many different ways, right? In terms of how companies reach out to customers and how they market to them is just mind-boggling. We have a question from Claudia. What are the initial steps that a company should take to address the introduction of AI in their daily work processes? I think I'll take a shot at this. George, Nisha, feel free to chip in. I think, Claudia, the first thing that we really need to talk about, or rather, the two things we need to talk about are where are we going to use generative AI? What are the use cases? So, right now, I think the state of adoption and the state of technology maturity is such that we have to take a use case led approach. And when we identify or prioritize the use cases, there are some things to be that we need to keep in mind. The first thing that we'll need to keep in mind is what's the risk associated with the use case. So, is something if something is very sensitive with deep regulatory implications or deep customer experience implications, and it has a lot of risk associated with it, either from a regulatory standpoint, from a data security standpoint, or from a customer experience standpoint, then that's possibly not the best place to start, right? Whereas if there's a use case which is simple, which is really about, hey, this is going to speed up things significantly, this is going to help my workers become more productive, and it's more inward facing in some ways, I think that's likely going to be a better place to start, right? Um, the second thing to keep in mind is, um, does it really need AI, right? And there's a lot of confusion about what is AI, what is automation, right? What is generative AI, right? So, what do we really need, right? So, we don't always need to bring a bazooka to a sword fight, you know. When if there's a use case which is truly merits usage of AI, and there is enough value for using that, right? So we need to get an ROI analysis done. So net of that, think of it as two dimensions. One is risk, the second is value derived, right? Finally, the and part of value derived, I think this is one of the things that people don't always keep in mind, right? Is let's focus on low hanging fruits. Let's focus on what we can solve in, let's say, 12 weeks from now, right? Rather than thinking of the grand unified vision, because guess what? The technology is going to change, right? That's the world we live in. So let's think of what we can address in the next quarter, right? And go from there. That would be my best advice. George, Nisha, feel free to chip in.
Thanks, CJ. No, I think it depends on your role in the organization and the type of things you want to do. So if you want to get start using some of this stuff in AI, for example, putting it into journeys or fixed operations is going to take either C-suite investment or board level mandate and approvals. However, if you're you know one of the people that are doing certain tasks in the organization, there's no reason why you can't try and start using some generative AI or to help you with your tasks to then do your output. That sort of helping on a one-to-one basis to then get your tasks and output done. As long as I think you're transparent with the organization that you are using generative AI to help with some of these things. I think that's a good place to start to see, like I said before, helping you make a move into something. So if you're writing an article or you have to get something out there, just start using it on a one-to-one basis and then make that the case, the business case, to then adopt it wider in your team and then into the organization, etc. So I think that's something, that's a way of starting. The unofficial. I know I said like we're going to watch out for this all shadow tech stack, but I think that is the easiest way of just proving out a point rather than going for massive investment and trying to change something that's already in place, because there is risk associated to that.
Excellent. Let's get into this piece around risks. I'm going through the questions that the audience is putting up, right? Uh, and there clearly seems to be a lot of concerns around the risks associated with it, and how can enterprises look at some of this, right? Um, Nisha, do you want to talk us through some of this?
Sure. So I think, as CJ mentioned, that there are quite a few risks which are associated with generative AI. But I think the concerns around those risks have also become very, very important. So one of the areas where we are seeing there are a lot of questions being asked are risks associated with data security and privacy. Now there are quite a few, news that we have heard from a number of enterprises where there have been issues with respect to data leakage when it comes to use of generative AI. There was this classic example of Samsung, wherein some of the coders of Samsung were using generative AI for the perspective of code completion and code review, and they ended up sharing confidential code of the organization with the system. There have also been concerns where some of the people who have used Chat GPT have suddenly gotten access to the private information of other users. So, all those concerns continue to exist in the industry when it comes to data security and privacy. And if you were to further drill this down and understand what it really means, there are concerns pertaining to confidentiality, wherein using confidential data for model training and whether that data is even GDPR compliant or not, which has led to some of the countries even banning ChatGPT, and Italy is a classic example over here. There are concerns with respect to data leakages, where exposure of private information has also happened. There have been concerns with respect to data reliability as well when it comes to the technology not producing the right output, and even with respect to plagiarism. And what we are seeing is the impact magnitude that is associated with risk when it comes to data security and privacy is much higher, specifically when it comes to financial law, specifically when it comes to some of the legal implications that this risk might have on companies' operations, and of course the reputational damage as well. The other area which has traditionally been important in the context of AI is explainability. Now we've always called AI as the black box of AI, wherein you input certain things and then you get something out of it, and you have no idea why the output is the way it is. What are some of the factors that were considered by the AI system in order to arrive at that output? So, explainability has been a challenge with machine learning as well. But at least in my view, why explainability becomes even more concerning with generative AI compared to other AI technologies is because humans have this, because we are interacting in a very human like fashion, in a very conversational fashion with AI systems, we have a tendency, or in our subconscious mind, to associate human like qualities to the AI systems that we are interacting with as well, specifically when it comes to generative AI. And what that does is, in our subconscious mind, the level of trust that we have on that system tends to increase. But we must always remember that at the end of the day, it's a machine that we are interacting with. And hence, the question of explainability when it comes to generative AI becomes even more important compared to the traditional machine learning algorithms that we've been using in the past. And explainability from the perspective of trustworthiness, explainability from the perspective of hallucination effect or deep fakes and data reliability are just some of the aspects that organizations continue to ask a lot of questions around. There are concerns with respect to ownership and responsibility as well. And that was one of the questions which was raised earlier as well. That when I am using generative AI to generate a particular output, what are the laws and regulations surrounding copyright or ownership with respect to the data that is generated by the systems? What is the level of accountability that exists when it comes to certain legal issues that might be arising because of incorrect data, or because that the data might be that might be produced may be subject to IP infringement as well? And of course, last but not the least is bias and ethicality, wherein we have seen some of the cases where the output that has been produced by the AI systems has been biased. And also, there are certain unethical responses that have also been produced by the systems. So, as you think about all the use cases that we were talking about when it comes to customer experience, we truly believe that all of these use cases are very much possible, and enterprises are continuing to invest in it. But responsible adoption of these use cases would require a lot of risk management when it comes to some of the concerns that we have just outlined over here. I'll just take a quick pause to see if CJ, George, you have anything to add with respect to some of the conversations you might be participating in as well.
I think, Nisha, thanks again, very insightful. I think all of these risks are very real, right? And I'll just say two things. One is, how do you think of managing these risks on a continuous basis, right? And which is why we believe we need to invest in creating teams and skills and protocols and service categories which are centered very clearly on managing the risks associated with AI, right? If we have to derive the business benefits of AI, right, we also need to invest in managing that on a continuous basis. So we believe that in the future, as markets evolve, as standards emerge, as regulatory frameworks catch up with the pace of technology evolution, we are going to see the emergence of AI assurance as a separate service category on its own. And I think we can't wait for that to happen because it's not going to happen organically. It's not going to happen like an epiphany. I think each of us need to think about that from the standpoint of our organization and our business and our adoption roadmap and start putting the initial steps around it, right? The second thing that I'll say is, Nisha, when you put that slide up, right, we had this thing called trigger stage, right? That's one of the things that's a clue, right? So if you're thinking of where you need to focus, right, start with the trigger stage. Understand what are the vulnerabilities you have at each of the trigger stage, and start closing the gaps there. George, what do you think?
Thanks, CJ. Um, I think on this question that's just popped up actually with from Rajiv, what actions can board takes to have risks assessed in a structured manner and not have jungle freedom across the organization using generative AI? Look, I think one thing, and it's a wider topic, right? But one thing is the boards have to change shape. I think more direct, in there's a lot of DE and I going on, but I think specifically forget gender, race, and things like that in terms of that diversity, but diversity of experience. Boards have stayed at that sort of age where actually, they've probably not had hands-on experience in the last 20, 30 years. So they've not had hands-on experience of internet. They've not had hands-on experience of social. And generative AI just adds to that. So how can boards be making decisions when on a topic sometimes they don't really know? So I think whether there's a secondary board or more of an XCOM or an OpCom type thing, I think it's more important to have people infusing that and boards not just making decisions but actually learning. So I think there's going to be a piece where boards have to actually understand some of the content and the context that they are making decisions on, and I don't think there's a bigger topic than AI at the moment on that piece, because it will impact everything, right? It impacts to what you've been saying: risk, cybersecurity, legislation. There might be legal impacts. There might be so many different things that the board takes up because of AI. So I think if one thing that boards can do is have more advisory and more open access to people joining the board, whether that's for a topic for that month or whatever, but being more inclusive rather than the old guard of the traditional boards. I think that would be really helpful. That's my take on it from one angle.
Yeah, no, Judge, completely agree with you. So, in a nutshell, please, please, please listen to the experts, right? And that's very important. And we are living in an age where we simply need to rely on people with innovators with far more hands-on experience than we would normally have in a board, right? Yeah, I think the other thing that boards need to do is think about this not just from your standpoint, from how it affects things within your firewall, right? But also try to take an ecosystem approach. This is if you really need to manage the risks for your company, you need to be talking to your suppliers. You need to be talking to your partners, right? You need to be talking to your, if you're in a B2B business, you need to be talking to your customers. If you're in a B2C business, you need to educate customers about their rights, right? And what you are doing to protect them. Don't try to hide it under 15 pages of legalese, right? So, all of those at the end of the day are, you know, going to help you boost adoption, save you a lot of money, help you innovate faster, right? So that would be my take.
Yeah, and another thing, CJ, that I wanted to add from the perspective of challenges, though it has not been called out here, and I think when we talk to a lot of enterprises based out of Europe, there are also concerns pertaining to sustainability as well. In fact, I was reading a statistic very recently wherein it said that just to train one LLM model, 315 tons of carbon dioxide gets released in the atmosphere. So, if you think about this from an enterprise perspective, where A, the conversations around sustainability are becoming important, and B, there are certain regulations that they also have to adhere to, then addressing their sustainability concerns also becomes important as you embark on not just some of the use cases, but as you think about broader generative AI adoption from an enterprise perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And that again is a critical consideration in terms of how we weigh the benefits of AI against the broader ESG mandates that both are striving towards, right? Um, we are at the almost at the end of our session. So, Nisha, what do you want to talk about as we move towards the concluding part?
I think as we move to the conclusion, I am personally very excited about the potential of this technology in our lives. I mean, personal, professional, in the ways in which it is, just like any other technology in the past, which has continued to create new jobs as well. And now, when we talk about generative AI, we suddenly have a new job role of prompt engineer. So I'm very excited about how generative AI is going to transform customer experiences by not just ushering in productivity and efficiency gains across the plethora of use cases that we just spoke about today, but also from the perspective of ushering in newer experiences as well, and newer ways of doing things as well is something that is very exciting. And the technology is also changing by the day. So what all investments tech vendors continue to make in order to address some of the challenges that we just spoke about, in order to address some of the cost concerns as well, which will eventually become important as enterprises continue to embark more and more use cases, is also something that we need to keep out a lookout for.
Very, very well said, Nisha. I think we have time for one last question. Before we take that, I'd just like to say that, thank you so much for your engagement on this event. Right, we are overwhelmed by all the comments and questions that have come up. Unfortunately, there's only so many of them that we can take live. We will be reaching back to you as best as we can to try and answer each and every one of your questions. As part of this event, we will also be offering a report, right? So you'll get a link to that report, and you can get access to a 30-minute consultation with one of our analysts on the topic, right? So, feel free to reach out to us and have a conversation. This is exciting space. None of us have all the answers, and we are all trying to learn from each other. So we very much look forward to engaging with you. Before we close out, let's just take this one last question that we had around how can we increase trust in users, customers about their privacy. George, do you want to talk about that?
Sure, thanks, CJ. I think that there's always a barter, right? When you're asking for information from a consumer, they want to see value given back, right? So I think if you take that as, are we providing value for the things that we are asking, and there is a trust aspect there. So for example, you grow that trust. Don't ask for 100 things in one go. Build it up slowly. It's basically where email marketing and other marketing tactics have come from. If you don't need to ask for that information in order to benefit and to reciprocate value, don't ask for it at that time. So I think more and more the trust grows by the consumer or the customer seeing that I gave you something and you've provided value back, whether that is a better uh, generation of cross sell upsell, whether it's more recommendations on a report that you might like. As long as there's that value, then that consumer will want to give more. And then obviously there's the obvious things that, like, data breaches and things like that do not offer trust. So really take those areas seriously in your organization. Make sure that you have the correct policies and processes, and talk about it. Be transparent. This is what we've got. This is the steps we're providing. If you give me this, this is what I hopefully will give back to you. Um, Everything's based on transparency, and I think that's the best way forward. Um, so yeah, I mean, thank you very much as well. I've really enjoyed this. Like I said, it was my first LinkedIn Live. It's a great topic. To Nisha's point, I think I'm also excited to see where AI goes. Not just as a thing. I think it's one of those technologies that's it's kind of grown where even when you talked about the system integrators adopting and pushing it into their client list, it's not something that you can just give and
Yeah.
implement for the client. You've got to learn to work with it. It's not something we can just implement for you or do something. There's going to be a whole job description and a whole new category. We've seen prompt engineers and things like that come up. So next, 1 to 3 years, there'll be a new career area of these people that have just started their career and they've worked alongside AI. So AI working alongside people will provide immense value to the organization. So I think I'm really excited to see what that is. AI strategists, content creators, everyone's going to have this thing where it's your base tool in order for you to provide value to an organization or to customers. So that's what I'm most excited about, seeing generative AI infuse into the career and workplace. So thank you very much for having me again, and thank you to everyone for listening.
It's lovely having you with us, George, and thank you everybody once again for listening in. Don't forget to download the report. Many of you will get answers to some of the questions that you have posed as part of that. And feel free to reach out to us to schedule a 30-minute conversation with our subject matter experts on the topic. See you on the other side. Lovely having you with us, and look forward to the next session. Cheers, everybody.
Bye all.